Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Earth Defense Force Station and watched the sky turn black with alien ships. The massive vessels blocked out the sun over major cities across the globe, casting shadows that stretched for miles. He had been a commander in the Earth Defense Force for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The ships were enormous, each one the size of a small city, and there were hundreds of them positioned above every major population center on Earth. Dr. Lisa Parker rushed through the corridors of the United Nations Research Division building in New York, her tablet clutched tightly in her hands. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had always dreamed of first contact with alien life, but not like this. The massive ship hanging over Manhattan was broadcasting signals that her team was desperately trying to decode. The message was simple and terrifying when they finally translated it. The aliens called themselves the Zephyrian Hegemony. They had come to add Earth to their growing empire. Lisa's blood ran cold as she read the translation on her screen. The message was not a greeting or an attempt at peaceful communication. It was an ultimatum. Earth had 72 hours to surrender completely, or every human on the planet would be destroyed. President Amanda Walsh sat in the emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, listening to reports from around the world. Every major city was under the shadow of these alien ships. Moscow, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Delhi, Sao Paulo, Lagos, Sydney, all of them had the massive vessels hovering overhead like mechanical storm clouds. The military advisors were already discussing nuclear options, but the aliens had made it clear that any attack would result in immediate retaliation. Captain Ryan Davis monitored the alien fleet movements from deep inside Cheyenne Mountain. The massive complex had been built to survive nuclear war, but now it served as humanity's primary observation post for tracking the alien ships. Ryan had spent his career analyzing enemy movements and strategies, and something about the alien positioning bothered him. They were following what appeared to be a standard pattern, positioning their ships in predictable formations above population centers. Colonel Beth Turner studied the satellite feeds showing alien ship positions across the globe. As one of Earth's top military strategists, she had spent years studying historical battles and conquest patterns. The alien deployment looked textbook perfect, almost too perfect. It was the kind of formation an army might use when they expected no real resistance, when they had grown comfortable with easy victories. Dr. Lisa Parker worked through the night with her team, analyzing every piece of data they could gather about the Zephyrian hegemony. What they discovered was even more frightening than the ships themselves. The aliens had conquered over 200 worlds in the past 1,000 years. Every single conquest had followed the same pattern: arrival, ultimatum, surrender within days. No species had ever managed to resist them for more than a week. The alien technology was clearly centuries ahead of anything humans possessed. Their ships generated energy shields that could deflect any weapon Earth currently had. Their weapons could level entire cities from orbit. Their faster-than-light travel allowed them to cross the galaxy in months rather than millennia. By every logical measure, resistance was hopeless. But Captain Ryan Davis kept studying the alien movements. And the more he watched, the more convinced he became that the aliens were following a script. They moved with the confidence of a species that had never faced real opposition. Their ships maintained perfect formations because they had never needed to adapt their tactics. They had grown overconfident from 1,000 years of easy victories. President Walsh addressed the world as the 72-hour deadline approached. She stood before the cameras knowing that this might be humanity's last free speech. The alien ships hung in the sky behind her, visible through the windows of the United Nations building. She could surrender and hope the aliens would be merciful to a submissive population. She could order a nuclear strike and watch humanity die in the retaliation. Or she could choose the third option that Colonel Turner had proposed. Jake Morrison received his orders as the deadline approached. The Earth Defense Force was not going to surrender. They were not going to launch a desperate nuclear attack either. Instead, they were going to do something the aliens had never encountered in their 1,000-year history of conquest. They were going to make the Zephyrians regret ever hearing the name Earth. The plan was simple in concept but revolutionary in execution. Humanity would not fight like the other conquered species had fought. They would not follow conventional military doctrine or predictable resistance patterns. Instead, they would embrace the one advantage they had that no other species seemed to possess: the human tendency toward creative chaos and absolute refusal to accept defeat even when logic demanded surrender. As the 72-hour deadline expired, the Zephyrian fleet commanders waited for either Earth's surrender or a primitive nuclear response. They did not expect what actually happened. Across the globe, 7 billion humans began to demonstrate why their species had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and every other disaster their world had thrown at them. The Zephyrians were about to learn that some species simply refused to be conquered. The Zephyrian fleet commanders expected either complete surrender or a desperate nuclear attack from the primitive humans below. What they received instead was something that had never happened in their 1,000 years of conquest across the galaxy. The humans began to fight back in ways that made no sense according to every military doctrine the aliens knew. Dr. Kevin Hayes worked frantically in his makeshift laboratory beneath the ruins of the NASA facility in Houston. The former space engineer had less than 24 hours to turn civilian technology into weapons that could somehow hurt the alien invaders. Around him, engineers and scientists worked with whatever they could find: computer parts, radio equipment, even kitchen appliances, trying to create something that might give humanity a fighting chance. Meanwhile, in a basement in San Francisco, young Alex Chun typed commands into his computer with fingers that had not stopped moving for 18 straight hours. The 20-year-old hacker had managed something that should have been impossible. He had found a way into the alien communication networks. The Zephyrians used broadcast signals to coordinate their fleet movements, and Alex discovered that these signals could be intercepted and modified using principles reverse engineered from their own transmissions. Commander Julie Ross studied the intelligence reports coming in from around the globe and made a discovery that changed everything. The alien fleet operated on centralized command protocols, with orders flowing down from flagship vessels to smaller ships in predictable patterns. This was efficient for controlling conquered populations, but it created a massive vulnerability that the aliens had never needed to consider. No species had ever been chaotic enough to exploit it. Marine Corps General Frank Stone stood in the Pentagon War Room, looking at tactical displays that showed alien landing zones across the planet. The first Zephyrian ground forces had begun, deploying in major cities, expecting the same quick submission they had received from every other conquered world. Instead, they found themselves facing something unprecedented: an entire species that seemed incapable of accepting defeat. The first truly unconventional attack came from rural Kansas, where farmer Bill Watson had modified his crop dusting aircraft with equipment designed for spreading metallic chaff. When he flew his small plane directly through the sensor fields of the alien ships hovering over Wichita, their detection systems were suddenly blinded by clouds of reflective particles. For the first time in their military history, Zephyrian commanders found themselves unable to track enemy movements. In São Paulo, teenage hacker Maria Santos achieved what military computer specialists had thought impossible. Working from her bedroom computer, she successfully planted a virus in the secondary systems of the Zephyrian fleet orbiting over Brazil. The virus was simple but effective. It caused minor system glitches that forced alien technicians to constantly reset their equipment. reducing their operational efficiency by significant margins. The real shock came when Zephyrian ground forces began landing in New York City. They expected to find a terrified population hiding in buildings, waiting for rescue that would never come. Instead, they encountered Danny Clark, a high school history teacher who had organized the civilians of Manhattan into an urban warfare nightmare. Using construction equipment as improvised tanks and turning subway tunnels into ambush points, Clark's civilian army began inflicting casualties on alien forces that had not lost a single soldier in their previous campaigns. Captain Nicole Ford led the most audacious attack yet attempted by human forces. The former Air Force pilot had organized every civilian aircraft on the West Coast into an improvised attack squadron. Crop dusters became bombers, carrying improvised explosives made from farming chemicals. News helicopters became reconnaissance units, feeding real-time intelligence to resistance cells on the ground. Commercial drones swarmed alien positions like mechanical insects, each one carrying a small explosive charge that could damage alien equipment. Dr. Peter Johnson worked in a hidden laboratory beneath the streets of Chicago, studying pieces of alien technology that resistance fighters had managed to recover from crash sites. What he discovered changed everything humans thought they knew about the invasion. The Zephyrian weapons were incredibly advanced, but they were designed specifically for fighting conventional military forces. The aliens had never encountered guerrilla warfare conducted by an entire planetary population. Former Special Forces operative Sam Rivera used his military experience to organize resistance cells around the globe. But he quickly discovered that conventional military tactics were not what humanity needed. Instead, he began coordinating through encrypted gaming networks that allowed millions of people to participate in the resistance effort. The aliens had learned to monitor military communications, but they had never considered that humans might use entertainment systems to coordinate military operations. The Zephyrians attempted to break human morale by targeting power grids and communication networks, but this strategy backfired in ways they could never have predicted. Engineer Tracy Adams led teams across the country in converting centralized power systems into distributed networks that became more resilient as more people joined them. When the aliens destroyed main power plants, humans simply created thousands of smaller power sources that were impossible to target effectively. And classrooms turned into bomb factories. High school chemistry teacher Carol Mitchell began producing explosives using nothing more than household cleaning supplies and fertilizer. Her simple formulas spread across the globe through hidden radio networks, teaching millions of ordinary people how to turn everyday items into weapons. The aliens watched in growing confusion as humans demonstrated an ability to create military equipment from literally anything they could find. Its specialist Greg Turner coordinated the creation of mesh networks that connected human resistance cells across continents. When the aliens destroyed internet infrastructure, humans simply created new networks using everything from amateur radio to modified gaming consoles. The communication system became more complex and harder to disrupt as more people joined the resistance effort. The Zephyrian High Command found themselves facing something that violated every principle of warfare they understood. Instead of a centralized military force that could be defeated by destroying key targets, they were fighting an entire species where every individual was a potential combatant. The humans refused to follow predictable patterns, turning everything from kitchen knives to children's toys into improvised weapons that somehow managed to hurt forces equipped with technology centuries more advanced than anything Earth possessed. 3 weeks after the invasion began, the Zephyrian commanders faced a situation that had never occurred in their species' 1,000-year history of conquest. They controlled less territory than their strategic models had predicted, and human resistance was growing stronger instead of weaker. The aliens had expected to be processing surrender documents and installing colonial governors by now. Instead, they found themselves bogged down in urban warfare against an enemy that seemed to multiply every time they killed one. Captain Nicole Ford flew her converted crop duster through the early morning sky over Los Angeles, leading a squadron of civilian aircraft that had been transformed into an improvised air force. Behind her flew news helicopters equipped with improvised rockets, private planes carrying homemade bombs, and even commercial drones that swarmed around alien positions, like angry metal bees. The Zephyrians had air superiority in theory, but they had never learned to fight an enemy that turned every flying machine on the planet into a potential weapon. Dr. Peter Johnson made his breakthrough in the hidden laboratory beneath Chicago, while studying a damaged alien weapon that resistance fighters had recovered from a crash site. The weapon was incredibly sophisticated, capable of cutting through any known Earth material, but it was designed to fight conventional armies with predictable tactics. The aliens had never encountered guerrilla warfare conducted by an entire planetary population, and their weapons were not adapted for fighting enemies that refused to form organized military units. Former Special Forces Operative Sam Rivera coordinated resistance operations from a basement in Detroit, using gaming networks and social media platforms that the aliens had not learned to monitor effectively. His network included everyone from retired military personnel to college students, housewives to factory workers. The resistance had no central command structure because humans had learned that centralized systems could be targeted and destroyed. Instead, millions of people simply decided to fight back using whatever resources they had available. The Zephyrians made their next major mistake when they attempted to break human morale by targeting infrastructure systems. They destroyed power, plants, water treatment facilities, and communication networks, expecting the humans to surrender when their comfortable civilization collapsed. Instead, humanity demonstrated the adaptability that had allowed their species to survive every disaster their planet had ever produced. Engineer Tracy Adams led the effort to rebuild power systems using distributed networks that could not be easily targeted. When the aliens destroyed the main electrical grid, humans created thousands of smaller power sources using everything from car batteries to solar panels salvaged from destroyed buildings. The new power network was actually more resilient than the original system because it had no central points of failure. Specialist Greg Turner helped establish communication networks that became more complex and harder to disrupt as more people joined them. Humans connected everything from amateur radio sets to modified gaming consoles into a mesh network that could route information around damaged sections automatically. When the aliens destroyed one communication hub, 10 more would appear to replace it. High school chemistry teacher Carol Mitchell became one of the most dangerous humans on the planet without ever leaving her hometown in Ohio. Working in her garage laboratory, she developed simple formulas for creating explosives using household materials that could be found in any grocery store. Her instructions spread through hidden radio broadcasts and encrypted internet messages, teaching millions of people how to create weapons from cleaning supplies, fertilizer, and common chemicals. The psychological impact on Zephyrian ground forces became apparent when their casualty reports began including something that had never appeared in their military records before: combat stress reactions. Alien soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds without losing a single comrade suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that could appear from anywhere at any time. Every human civilian was a potential threat. Every building might contain an ambush, and every piece of ordinary equipment could be turned into a weapon. Mechanic turned saboteur. Tony Rodriguez led teams in Los Angeles that specialized in stealing alien technology and reverse engineering it for human use. Working in abandoned auto repair shops, These teams learned to modify alien equipment using nothing more than basic hand tools and creative thinking. They could not match the sophistication of Zephyrian technology, but they could create hybrid weapons that surprised alien forces with their own firepower. Turned against them. Dr. Amy Foster worked in a mobile laboratory that moved constantly. To avoid alien detection, studying Zephyrian biology from tissue samples recovered from battlefields. Her research revealed that the aliens had evolved on a world with higher gravity and different atmospheric composition, making them vulnerable to biological agents that would be harmless to humans and Earth life. This discovery led to the development of targeted weapons that could incapacitate alien forces without causing environmental damage. Former biochemist Gary Phillips used Dr. Foster's research to create biological agents that exploited Zephyrian physiological weaknesses. Working in hidden laboratories around the globe, teams of scientists developed airborne compounds that could be dispersed using everything from crop dusters to modified air conditioning systems. The aliens found their soldiers collapsing from respiratory distress in areas where humans continued to function normally. The global resistance network grew into something that the Zephyrians could not understand or effectively counter. Former NATO strategist Colonel Diana Brooks coordinated what humans called Operation Hornet's Nest, simultaneous attacks on alien supply lines across 6 continents. The operation succeeded because it had no central command structure that could be compromised, no communication system that could be intercepted, and no predictable pattern that alien intelligence could analyze. Young prodigy Emma Watson achieved something that should have been impossible when she successfully hacked directly into a Zephyrian command ship orbiting above Boston. Working with her university's computer science department, she managed to feed false information into the alien tactical systems, causing confusion that resulted in alien forces receiving contradictory orders and sometimes firing on their own units. The Zephyrian High Command faced reports of supply convoys being ambushed by enemies, who seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. Their forces were being attacked by weapons made from stolen alien technology combined with human engineering principles. Their communication systems were being disrupted by hackers who turned their own technology against them. Most disturbing of all, some of their soldiers were showing signs of psychological breakdown, something that had never happened in their military history. For the first time since their species had begun conquering other worlds, the Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that grew stronger under pressure, adapted faster than their countermeasures could be deployed, and refused to accept the logical reality of their technological disadvantage. The humans were teaching the galaxy's most successful conquerors a lesson they had never needed to learn, that some species simply could not be conquered. 2 months into what should have been a simple conquest, Zephyrian forces faced something that had never appeared in their military databases. An enemy that actually grew stronger under pressure. The alien commanders sent increasingly desperate reports back to their homeworld, describing a species that seemed to violate every known principle of warfare and psychology. The humans refused to be broken by superior technology, overwhelming force, or logical impossibility. Mechanic-turned-saboteur Tony Rodriguez had transformed his Los Angeles auto repair shop into the most dangerous garage in human history. His butthurt saboteur Tony Rodriguez had transformed his Los Angeles auto repair shop into the most dangerous garage in human history. Teams had learned to strip down captured alien vehicles and weapons, combining Zephyrian technology with human engineering to create hybrid systems that surprised even their creators. The aliens watched in confusion as humans began using their own advanced weapons against them, modified with crude but effective human improvements that somehow made them more dangerous than the originals. Dr. Amy Foster's mobile research laboratory had become the center of a biological warfare program that the Zephyrians could not counter. Working with tissue samples recovered from alien casualties, her team had mapped the complete physiological weaknesses of the invading species. The aliens had evolved on a high-gravity world with a methane-rich atmosphere, making them vulnerable to compounds that were completely harmless to Earth life. Former biochemist Gary Phillips used Dr. Foster's research to develop what became known as the sleep gas, a biological agent that could incapacitate Zephyrian forces without killing them or harming the environment. The compound was simple enough to manufacture in high school chemistry labs, and it could be dispersed using everything from crop dusters to modified air conditioning systems in buildings occupied by alien forces. The Global Resistance Network, coordinated by former NATO strategist Colonel Diana Brooks, launched Operation Hornet's Nest with simultaneous attacks on alien supply lines across every continent. The operation succeeded beyond all expectations because it exploited the one advantage humans had discovered: their complete unpredictability. Unlike every other species the Zephyrians had conquered, humans had no centralized command structure that could be compromised and no standard tactical doctrine that could be analyzed and countered. Young computer prodigy Emma Watson achieved what military intelligence experts had declared impossible when she successfully penetrated the main computer systems of the Zephyrian flagship orbiting above North America. Working from her university dormitory, she had learned to think like an alien computer programmer, understanding their logical patterns well enough to insert false data into their tactical systems. Alien commanders began receiving reports of massive human armies that did not exist, and missing supply convoys that were actually safely delivered. The psychological impact on Zephyrian ground forces became impossible to ignore when entire units began requesting medical evacuation for what human doctors would have recognized as combat stress disorders. Alien soldiers who had participated in the conquest of dozens of worlds without losing a single comrade now found themselves fighting an enemy that turned every human encounter into a potential death trap. Children carried improvised explosives, elderly civilians sniped from windows, and ordinary workers sabotaged equipment with a creativity that alien minds could not predict or counter. Space engineer Lucy Morgan led the team that achieved the most audacious victory yet recorded in human military history. Working with a group of former astronauts and aerospace engineers, she managed to capture an intact Zephyrian transport ship that had been forced to land for repairs in the Nevada desert. The aliens had made the mistake of assuming that primitive humans could not operate their advanced technology, but Lucy's team proved them wrong by not only learning to fly the ship, but using it to attack other alien vessels. Former astronaut Jack Bell served as pilot for humanity's first captured alien spacecraft, learning to operate technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans had ever built. The Zephyrian ship's computer systems were designed to be intuitive for their species, which meant they could be learned by any intelligent being willing to think like an alien. Jack discovered that Zephyrian technology was actually less complex than human systems in some ways, because the aliens had never needed to design equipment that could be operated by multiple species with different thought patterns. Computer programmer Carlos White worked alongside Jack Bell to turn alien technology against its creators. The captured Zephyrian ship contained detailed intelligence about fleet movements, supply schedules, and tactical plans that the aliens had never expected to fall into enemy hands. More importantly, it contained communication codes that allowed humans to intercept and modify alien orders, turning the Zephyrians' own coordination systems into weapons against them. Admiral Helen Price coordinated the first major naval operation using captured alien technology, leading a fleet of human vessels equipped with hybrid weapon systems. The aliens had never encountered an enemy that could adapt their technology so quickly, and they found themselves facing attacks from weapons that used their own power sources and targeting systems but operated according to human tactical principles that their defensive systems could not predict. Underground leader Victor Kim emerged from the Seoul subway system with an army of civilians armed with weapons that combined human creativity with alien technology. His forces had spent weeks learning to operate in the underground tunnels that the aliens could not effectively monitor, creating a hidden network that could strike at any target in the city and disappear before Zephyrian forces could respond. Dr. Rebecca Davis achieved a breakthrough in energy weapon technology by combining human engineering principles with captured Zephyrian power cells. Her team created weapons that were crude by alien standards but devastatingly effective against enemies who had never faced their own technology turned against them. The new weapons could penetrate alien armor and shields because they used the same energy frequencies as Zephyrian defensive systems, creating resonance effects that the aliens had never needed to design against. Former NASA mission controller Susan Lee coordinated the most ambitious plan yet attempted by human forces, using modified satellites and space debris to create a kinetic bombardment system that could target Zephyrian installations from orbit. The aliens watched in disbelief as humans weaponized their own space junk, turning defunct satellites and orbital debris into guided projectiles that struck alien positions with devastating accuracy. The Zephyrian High Command received reports that made no sense according to their understanding of warfare and technology. Human forces were using alien weapons more effectively than their own troops. Primitive spacecraft were defeating advanced alien vessels by employing tactics that violated every principle of space combat. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to be enjoying the fight, treating the most advanced military force in the galaxy as nothing more than an interesting challenge to be solved through creativity and determination. For the first time in their 1,000-year history of conquest, the Zephyrians found themselves considering the possibility that they might actually lose a war to a technologically inferior species that refused to acknowledge the logical impossibility of their situation. 6 months after the invasion began, humanity launched its first major offensive operation against the Zephyrian fleet. What had started as desperate resistance by a conquered species had evolved into something the galaxy had never seen: a coordinated counterattack by an entire world that had transformed itself into a single massive military organization. Every human on Earth had become part of the war effort, contributing skills and resources that the aliens could never have anticipated. Space engineer Lucy Morgan stood on the bridge of the captured Zephyrian transport ship, now renamed the Human Victory, as it approached the main alien fleet in orbit above Earth. Her crew included former astronaut Jack Bell and computer programmer Carlos White, along with dozens of other humans who had learned to operate alien technology better than its original creators. The plan was audacious beyond belief: infiltrate the enemy fleet using their own ship and attack from within their defensive perimeter. The Zephyrians had made a critical error in their ship design by assuming that only their own species would ever operate their technology. Human engineers discovered that alien systems were actually easier to modify than human equipment, because they had been designed for a single species with predictable thought patterns. When humans began thinking outside those patterns, they could make the technology do things that its creators had never imagined possible. Admiral Helen Price coordinated the largest naval operation in human history, leading a fleet of ships equipped with hybrid human-alien weapon systems. The vessels looked like ordinary Earth naval ships, but they carried energy weapons powered by captured Zephyrian technology and guided by targeting systems that combined alien sensors with human tactical creativity. The aliens found themselves facing an enemy fleet that used their own advanced technology according to completely unpredictable human warfare principles. Underground leader Victor Kim emerged from the Seoul subway system with his army of civilian fighters, but now they carried weapons that could punch through alien armor and disable Zephyrian vehicles with single shots. The weapons were crude hybrids of human engineering and alien technology, but they were devastatingly effective because they had been designed by humans who understood both the strengths and weaknesses of Zephyrian equipment. Dr. Rebecca Davis distributed her new energy weapons through resistance networks that now span the entire globe, giving human forces firepower that could penetrate any alien defensive system. The weapons worked by using captured Zephyrian power cells to generate energy beams that operated on the same frequencies as alien shields, creating resonance effects that caused defensive systems to actually amplify the damage instead of preventing it. Former NASA mission controller Susan Lee activated the kinetic bombardment system that human engineers had created using modified satellites and space debris. The aliens watched in horror as their own orbital mechanics principles were turned against them, with defunct human satellites becoming guided projectiles that struck Zephyrian installations with pinpoint accuracy. The humans had weaponized their own space junk more effectively than the aliens had ever used their advanced orbital weapons. The most shocking moment came when young Emma Watson, working from her university computer lab, achieved complete control over the communication systems of the entire Zephyrian fleet. She had learned to think like an alien programmer so effectively that she could rewrite their software in real time, sending false orders that caused alien ships to fire on each other or waste resources attacking empty locations while real human forces struck elsewhere. Captain Nicole Ford led an air assault using hundreds of civilian aircraft that had been converted into attack vehicles, but now they carried alien weapons and operated with coordination provided by captured Zephyrian communication systems. The aliens found themselves being attacked by crop dusters that fired energy beams, news helicopters that launched guided missiles, and commercial drones that swarmed their positions like mechanical insects armed with alien explosives. The Zephyrian ground forces faced coordinated attacks from multiple directions as humanity demonstrated the tactical flexibility that came from having no centralized command structure. While Admiral Price's naval forces attacked from the oceans and Captain Ford's air unit struck from above, resistance cells led by fighters like Tony Rodriguez and Victor Kim emerged from underground tunnels and hidden bases to attack alien positions with weapons that used the aliens' own technology against them. Dr. Gary Phillips achieved the breakthrough that changed everything when his biological warfare program successfully developed airborne agents that could incapacitate entire Zephyrian units without harming humans or Earth's ecosystem. The compounds were dispersed using modified weather control systems, creating invisible clouds that rendered alien forces unconscious while human fighters moved through their positions unopposed. Former Special Forces Operative Sam Rivera coordinated resistance operations across 6 continents simultaneously, using communication networks that the aliens could no longer monitor or disrupt. His forces included everyone from retired military personnel to high school students, all of them armed with hybrid weapons and trained in tactics that combined human creativity with alien technology stolen from the invaders themselves. The psychological impact on the Zephyrian High Command became evident when they began receiving surrender requests from their own ground commanders. For the first time in their military history, Zephyrian officers were asking permission to withdraw from combat zones because their forces could no longer function effectively against an enemy that violated every principle of warfare they understood. Aliens discovered that humans had turned their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. The centralized command structure that had made them efficient conquerors of other worlds became a vulnerability when facing an enemy that could hack their communication systems and feed false information into their tactical networks. Every order they sent could be intercepted and modified by human hackers who had learned to think like alien commanders. Space engineer Lucy Morgan's infiltration team aboard the human Victory achieved the impossible when they successfully docked with the Zephyrian flagship and began taking control of the ship's systems from within. The aliens had never considered the possibility that an enemy might capture one of their vessels and use it to attack their own fleet, so they had no defensive protocols for detecting or preventing such an assault. The Zephyrian fleet commanders found themselves fighting a war unlike anything in their species' history. Their own technology was being used against them more effectively than they had ever used it themselves. Their communication systems were compromised, their tactical networks were feeding them false information, and their ground forces were reporting casualties from weapons that should not have been able to penetrate their defenses. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. Intelligence reports described human fighters laughing during combat, celebrating each victory as if the most advanced military force in the galaxy was nothing more than an entertaining challenge to be solved through creativity and determination. The Zephyrians were learning that some species could not be conquered because they simply refused to accept the possibility of defeat. 1 year after the Zephyrian hegemony arrived at Earth expecting another easy conquest, the last alien ships evacuated from orbit around the planet that had become their greatest military disaster. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the captured Zephyrian flagship, now flying under Earth colors, and watched the alien fleet retreat to the outer edges of the solar system. What had begun as humanity's darkest hour had become the galaxy's introduction to a species that simply refused to be conquered. The cost of victory had been enormous. Cities lay in ruins across the globe. Millions of humans had died fighting. The invaders and entire regions had been devastated by the conflict. But humanity had emerged from the war stronger and more united than ever before in their history. The species that had once fought each other over borders and resources had learned to work together against a common enemy, and that cooperation had proven more powerful than any weapon the aliens possessed. Dr. Lisa Parker, now heading the newly established Xenological Defense Institute, studied the vast databases recovered from captured Zephyrian ships and made discoveries that changed humanity's understanding of the galaxy. The aliens had conquered over 200 worlds during their 1,000-year expansion, and every single conquest had followed the same pattern until they reached Earth. Other species were still suffering under Zephyrian occupation, enslaved populations that had never learned to fight back the way humans had. The decision came naturally to the leaders of Earth's new unified government. Humanity would not stop at defending their own world. President Amanda Walsh addressed the United Nations in a ceremony honoring the millions who had given their lives in Earth's defense. But her words also carried a promise to species across the galaxy who had lost their freedom to alien conquerors. The age of easy conquest was ending, and humanity intended to make sure every oppressed world knew that help was coming. Captain Ryan Davis commanded the first human expedition beyond the solar system, leading a fleet of ships that combined the best of human engineering with captured Zephyrian technology. The hybrid vessels were faster and more powerful than anything either species had built alone, proof that human creativity could improve even the most advanced alien technology. Their destination was the Tau Ceti system, where intelligence indicated that another species was currently under attack by Zephyrian forces. The message that Earth sent to the galaxy was simple but revolutionary. Humanity had proven that the Zephyrian hegemony could be defeated. that their supposedly invincible military could be broken by a species with inferior technology but superior determination. More importantly, humans had demonstrated that conquest was not inevitable, that some worlds would fight back no matter how hopeless the odds appeared. Young Alex Chen, now director of Earth's Interstellar Communications Array, broadcast a signal to every corner of the galaxy using captured alien transmission systems. The message was transmitted in hundreds of languages recovered from Zephyrian databases, reaching every species that had ever been contacted by the galactic conquerors. To oppressed populations suffering under alien occupation, the message offered hope. To potential conquerors considering expansion, it offered a warning. The technological revolution that had begun during the war continued to transform human civilization. Dr. Rebecca Davis led research teams that were developing new weapons and defensive systems based on principles learned from studying alien technology. But the most important advancement was not in military hardware, it was in the human understanding of their own capabilities. The species that had always been divided by national and cultural boundaries had learned to work together as a single planetary civilization. Space engineer Lucy Morgan commanded the construction of Earth's first interstellar shipyard, where human engineers worked alongside reformed Zephyrian prisoners of war to build vessels that surpassed anything either species had created independently. The aliens who had once been conquerors now served as technical advisors, teaching humans the secrets of faster-than-light travel and energy manipulation in exchange for the chance to help liberate their own oppressed homeworld. Former astronaut Jack Bell piloted the prototype of humanity's new exploration ships, vessels designed specifically for long-range missions to provide aid and military support to worlds under alien occupation. The ships carried advanced medical facilities staffed by doctors like Dr. Amy Foster, who had developed treatments for the biological weapons that conquering species used to break the will of their victims. They also carried military specialists, like Sam Rivera, who could teach guerrilla warfare tactics to populations that had never learned to fight back. The psychological impact of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy faster than any physical ship could travel. Alien empires that had never heard of humanity suddenly found themselves reconsidering their expansion plans as news of the Zephyrian defeat reached their territories. The mathematical certainty of conquest had been broken by a species that refused to accept logical impossibility, and other potential conquerors began to wonder if their own supposedly invincible fleets might be vulnerable to similar tactics. Computer programmer Carlos White worked with teams of human and reformed alien specialists to establish a galactic communication network that connected resistance movements across dozens of star systems. The network allowed oppressed populations to coordinate their liberation efforts and share tactical information developed by human military theorists. For the first time in galactic history, conquered worlds had access to proven methods for defeating technologically superior invaders. Underground leader Victor Kim established training facilities where human instructors taught alien resistance fighters the principles of guerrilla warfare that had proven so effective against the Zephyrians. The aliens discovered that the human approach to asymmetric warfare could be adapted to almost any planetary environment and technological situation, giving hope to species that had accepted their enslavement as inevitable. Admiral Helen Price commanded Earth's new interstellar navy, a fleet of hybrid ships that served as both exploration vessels and military support for liberation operations across the galaxy. Her forces had already participated in the successful liberation of 3 Zephyrian-occupied worlds, proving that human tactical principles could be exported to other environments and species with devastating effectiveness against established conquerors. The Zephyrian hegemony tried to conquer Earth, and failed so completely that their defeat became a legend told across the galaxy. But humanity's victory was not just a military triumph, it was a declaration that the galaxy had a new player. And this player followed completely different rules than any species that had come before. The old pattern of conquest and submission was ending, replaced by something the galaxy had never experienced: a species that refused to let anyone else be conquered, either. In the depths of space, alien empires that had ruled unchallenged for millennia suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders, wondering if the humans were coming for them next. The answer was transmitted clearly through the galactic communication networks that now carried Earth's message to every corner of known space. Humanity was indeed coming, but not as conquerors. They were coming as liberators, and they would not stop until every enslaved world was free.